Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a fascinating, incredibly grounded look at our world. We're going to explore a massive, systems-level analysis of what actually drives human society. It's a deep dive into what ecological economist Nate Hagens calls our economic superorganism. You know, we usually think of our economy in terms of money, markets, and human innovation. But beneath all of that entire system lies a profound physical reality that touches literally every aspect of our lives, right down to the food we eat.
So to really grasp this, let's bring the macroeconomics all the way down to your dinner plate. Imagine you're sitting down to eat a simple, fresh Caesar salad. Have you ever stopped to wonder what actually powers that meal? I mean, most of us just think about the farmer, the soil, the sun, and maybe the truck driver who brought it to the local store. But hidden right behind that salad are incredible, invisible forces. It's this vast, complex network of energy and materials that makes our modern food system possible. Now, what's really interesting here is this staggering number, 450 billion. That represents the invisible human worker equivalents that are powering our global economy today. Let me explain. Today's world uses roughly 100 billion barrel of oil equivalents of coal, oil, and natural gas. When you translate the immense energy packed into those fossil fuels into actual physical work, it equals the labor of 450 billion human beings. We've effectively added an absolute army of invisible, fossil-fueled workers to the actual human workforce to do our heavy lifting. And honestly, nowhere is this more critical than in how we grow and distribute our food. Here's a quick roadmap for our explainer today. First, we'll look at the carbon pulse. Second, fossil-fueled food security. Third, the 1,500-mile salad. Fourth, the energy transition illusion. And finally, the great simplification. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the carbon pulse, our brief historical anomaly. To really understand our economy and our agriculture, you absolutely have to understand the carbon pulse. This is a brief, totally anomalous moment in human history. For hundreds of thousands of years, we just relied on the real-time flows of the sun. But in just the last few hundred years, we figured out how to draw down ancient hydrocarbons, oil, coal, natural gas. These are millions of years of ancient sunlight and biological matter condensed into incredibly power-dense fuels. We are currently burning through this ancient bank account millions of times faster than nature ever created it. We happen to be alive at the absolute peak of this pulse, and it has radically changed how we survive on this planet. Think about it like the difference between horizontal and vertical farming. For almost all of human history, agriculture was horizontal. We relied on the sustainable, surface flows of the earth, rain, sunshine, and natural soil fertility. Historically, scholars like Thomas Malthus famously predicted that population growth would eventually outstrip our food supply, leading to mass starvation. But Malthus was wrong, and the reason he was wrong is that we started farming vertically. We dug deep underground to extract ancient flammable fossils. We became utterly dependent on natural gas to synthesize the nitrogen fertilizers that grow our crops. We used oil to build and power massive tractors. Basically, we swapped out the natural human ecosystem for highly concentrated energy pumped from right beneath our feet. Let's move right along to Section 2, fossil-fueled food security and the hidden energy on your plate. Let this sink in for a second. One single barrel of oil contains the work potential of 4.5 years of human physical labor. Just imagine that. 4.5 years of you or me doing heavy, grueling physical work is condensed into one single barrel of oil. And right now, that barrel of oil costs roughly $70. So in a purely biophysical sense, we are literally buying years of hard labor for the price of a nice dinner out. This incredibly, mind-bogglingly cheap energy is exactly what underpins our entire global food system. So how does this actually play out in the real world? Well, take a dairy farm, for example. If you milk a cow manually, it takes about 30 minutes, uses zero external energy, and equates to an hourly wage of about $5. But look what happens when we introduce fossil energy to the mix. With intermediate machinery, which uses 180 times more external energy, we drastically cut down the time, and wages jump up to $20. What if you go fully automated? Well, you're now using 400 times more energy, spending just 2 minutes per cow, and wages hit $25 an hour. By pumping massive amounts of fossil energy into machines, we've artificially replaced human labor. That lowers the cost of goods and inflates both our profits and our wages. But, and this is absolutely crucial, there is a massive hidden fragility here. Because we use thousands of units of fossil energy to replace just 1 unit of human labor in these highly automated systems, we're now hypersensitive to the price of that energy.
If the price of energy doubles or triples, these highly automated, energy-intensive food production systems don't just become slightly less profitable, they can operate at a massive loss and shut down entirely. We've effectively traded the resilience of human labor for the hyper-efficiency of cheap energy. And that exact fragility leads us directly into Section 3, the 1500 miles salad, and the vulnerability of global supply chains. And this brilliantly illustrates what Hagens calls the just-in-time illusion. You see, modern food production isn't local anymore. It relies on a sprawling, six-continent supply chain. As a quick parallel, a staggering 85% of active pharmaceutical ingredients in the US come from India and China, and our food system is really no different. The average Caesar salad travels 1,500 miles just to reach your plate. This entire massive system only works because of a few very fragile factors: cheap energy, peaceful global cooperation, widely available financial credit, and a constant flow of fossil fuel-derived fertilizers. Sure, it's remarkably efficient, but it's completely disconnected from natural rhythms and highly, highly vulnerable to any geopolitical or ecological disruptions. Which brings us to Section 4, the energy transition illusion, and why we can't just swap the plug. Now, when faced with these massive vulnerabilities in the realities of climate change, the common cultural narrative is that we'll just swap out fossil fuels for green energy and keep the whole system running exactly as it is today. But let's look at the biophysical data neutrally for a second. While renewable energy is an amazing technology and is absolutely growing, we really have to recognize what it actually powers. Currently, only 20% of global energy use is electricity. The other 80%, that's non-electric. It's transportation, heating, and liquid fuels. Our industrial food system, those massive tractors, the cargo ships, the fertilizer production plants, they are almost entirely reliant on those dense liquid fossil fuels. You just can't simply plug a 1,500-mile agricultural supply chain into a solar panel. We also need to be super precise about the language we use for these technologies. The sun and the wind, those are absolutely truly renewable. But solar panels and wind turbines, they're what Hagens calls rebuildable. They are highly complex industrial products that require massive amounts of energy to manufacture. They rely heavily on the extraction of finite materials like copper, lithium, and rare earth elements like neodymium magnets. And the thing is, they don't last forever. They have to be entirely rebuilt every 20 to 30 years. So the green transition isn't exactly an escape from resource extraction. In many ways, it's just a shift toward a new kind of material dependency. So where do we go from here? That takes us to our final section, Section 5. The Great Simplification, a path forward for human culture. So the crucial point here is that we're entering an era where we simply can no longer expect endless growth fueled by cheap energy. But this isn't about doom and gloom. It's about finding a realistic, grounded path forward. As we crest the peak of this carbon pulse, human culture is going to have to simplify its systems to match a lower energy reality. To do this, Hagens proposes designing for a bend, not break response, using a framework he calls Goldilocks technology. This means building tools and systems that are just right for a localized, less energy-intense future. First, we've got to be conscious of energy, deeply understanding the true biophysical inputs our systems require. Second, we need simpler inputs. We should favor abundant materials like sodium over complex, rare ones like lithium. Third, and this is absolutely critical for our food security, we must create shorter supply chains. We have to nearshore and localize our food production so we aren't relying on those fragile 1,500-mile journeys. And fourth, circularity and regeneration. Right now, only 8% of the materials in our global economy are recycled. We must transition to systems that actively restore the Earth, rather than just endlessly extracting from it. I absolutely love this quote from Nate Hagens because it just hits the nail on the head. He says, "We do not face a resource shortage, but rather a longage of expectations." Think about it. The modern average person consumes hundreds of thousands of kilocalories of energy daily through our cars, our flights, our devices. But our biological bodies, we only actually require 2,000 to 3,000. The absolute best things in life, our communities, our relationships, our connection in nature, they don't require the massive carbon-heavy footprint we've become so accustomed to. We are living at an incredible crossroads right now. We have the knowledge to clearly see our trajectory and the cultural plasticity to actually change course. We know for a fact that small, local actions can ripple outward, creating real resilience in a chaotic system. So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. As our world inevitably transitions toward this great simplification, how will you build islands of coherence in your own life? How can you start shortening the supply chains for your own family, right in your own local food system? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today.